a city inside the mountain. Israel smashed the underground city built by Iran for Hezbollah. Smashed is really the only word that fits here. Well, now for the story itself. 10 years, millions of dollars in Iranian funding, and thousands of tons of concrete. That's what went into building the underground city of Kantara beneath the hills of southern Lebanon. A city where no civilians lived. It was used to prepare for war against Israel, of course. And today I'll tell you how this city ceased to exist. Not metaphorically, no, literally. 450 tons of explosives. Can you imagine that? 450 tons of explosives, one controlled explosion, and the underground capital of the elite Hezbollah units disappeared from the map. And all that's left with us is a seismic trace on the instruments of the Geological Service. This is one of the most significant military victories of this war. And today I'll explain why it's important not only militarily but also strategically for years to come. Well, let's start from the beginning, as they say. First, what is Kantara and why does the IDF call it not just a tunnel but an entire underground city? Next, by the way, is a separate story, no less impressive. Another underground one. Now the drone factory inside the mountain near the village of Majdalzun, which the Israeli military showed to journalists. That's how much it impressed them. They just brought them on a tour, like to the Louvre or the Hermitage. Only there they say it was even more interesting than the current, still unfinished battle at Sakrabet. This is Ali Taher, whom the military calls the nerve center of the Hezbollah division, and why Israeli soldiers are dying for this hill right now. After that comes the real reason for all of this, a new agreement between Israel and Lebanon, and the role of the Lebanese army as a buffer. This is a completely new concept, which may have once existed in minds and on paper, but was never implemented because it was impossible. And now, thanks to the operation in Iran, it has become possible. And why civilians are not allowed to return to the safe zone until Hezbollah is disarmed. By the way, that's also quite a new concept because Israel was never allowed to clear out an entire district and not let civilians return, although it was absolutely necessary for the safety of Israel and Israeli civilians. But as we know from the perspective of the world, a Jew is not as important as a person of any other nationality. It's true that when they need to exchange one Jew, they ask for 1,027 Arabs in return. It's true, this is documented. So it's kind of a strange concept. On one hand, a Jewish life is worth nothing, but on the other hand, one Jewish life is worth more than 1,000 Muslim lives. And finally, why do I consider what's happening not just a military operation, but one of the most justified and reasonable military efforts in recent years? In this regard, I have a question. What do you think if all the money that was spent on building underground cities, on weapons, on training, on everything related to war, had been spent instead on stimulating production in Lebanon, on building for civilian and social needs? What could Lebanon have become? I don't know, maybe Lebanon could have become a truly wonderful country, and what kind of life would the people of that country have had? It seems to me that it would probably have been one of the best places on the planet. But instead, there is horror and nightmare. I have a question for all those who say they support the struggle of the Arab peoples against Israeli occupation. We don't need someone else's land. We are terrified that there will be more non-Jews than Jews on this land. We don't want to live like salt and soup, as, excuse my language, Dmitry Bykov says. I can't say what I think about that. So why then throw all these efforts, money, and the lives of tens or even hundreds of thousands of Arabs into the meat grinder of hatred toward Israel, instead of creating a good life for their people? The idea is as follows. We hate the Jews so much that just to make the Jews live badly, we'll make sure our own people live badly too. If only they would leave Israel alone. It would be even better if Israel were used as a crucible for technology. What an amazing life there would be in Lebanon, in Jordan, and yes, in many other places around. I guarantee you that Israel would not attack anyone. They wouldn't try to seize anyone, wouldn't try to enslave anyone, God forbid. I know this for sure because I am an Israeli myself, and our main idea is the following. We do not want to live among another people. We want to live by ourselves. Oh God, what a horror. We want to live by ourselves. We don't even want to let anyone in. Immigrants, people from other countries, there's nothing like that. We want to live by ourselves. We don't need to seize other people's lands, as my Georgian relatives say. I swear. The League of Nations precisely defined the borders of the state that should be called Israel. That was in 1923. What has happened all these years since then? 100 years. It's an attempt to prevent Israel from living in peace. Not to let Israel, the Jews, live the way they want and build their lives as we want. For 78 years, the world has tried to destroy the state of Israel, not just since that moment, but since its founding as the natural state, accusing it of all sorts of terrible sins. And now, when underground cities are being discovered, built for one purpose only, to destroy Israel. After all, none of those who for years shouted that we Jews are murderers will ever apologize. Moreover, I'll tell you this, they will never apologize. But we are used to this, ladies and gentlemen. We didn't expect anything different. On April 28 of this year, the Israel Defense Forces announced that they had discovered and destroyed the largest Hezbollah tunnel complex. Not just one tunnel, but an entire network that the military, without any exaggeration, calls a tunnel city. The network is located in the Kantara area, just 11 kilometers from the Israeli border. It's, well, almost in a straight line between the Israeli communities. These are Margaliot and Dovev. This is Upper Galilee. And here's the scale, which personally amazed me when I first read the report. The western part of the network is 2 kilometers long and 10 kilometers wide, branching out in several directions right under several Lebanese villages. And when the engineers began to examine the area in detail, it turned out that there is also an almost parallel eastern part of the network, separate from the first. But apparently, Hezbollah was planning at some point to connect both halves into a single system. According to the military's assessment, this underground city could shelter, arm, and provide communications for thousands of fighters. Well, let's say the elite Radwan unit, that is, the main assault force that was being prepared for a hypothetical invasion of Galilee. According to intelligence reports, this network was built over the course of a whole decade with direct Iranian funding and design at a depth of up to 25 meters. I would be very surprised if Metrostroy wasn't involved in this. That is deeper than most basements of apartment buildings. Inside, they found equipped rooms with bunk beds, shafts for launching rockets with launchers already installed in them. Aimed, well, you'll be very surprised now, at Israel. What a surprise, right? And here's the twist of this story, which is actually why I started telling it. The military laid 450 tons of explosives, and with a single blast wiped this underground fortress off the face of the earth. Well, more precisely, wiped it out underground. Can you say it like that or not? I don't know. The explosion was so powerful that it was recorded by the Geological Survey of Israel as a seismic event. A separate seismograph detected it, and it was registered as a small earthquake. At the same time, the military, of course, made sure in advance that the explosion would not trigger the earthquake siren alert system. That accidentally happened a couple of times during similar operations. 10 years of construction, millions of Iranian dollars, if not $1 billion. And all of that disappeared in a matter of seconds. That wasn't the only discovery of the month. A little later, I'll tell you about an object that the military compares in terms of engineering complexity to Iranian military factories in Turkey and Syria. Only this one is hidden inside a mountain in Lebanon, right under an active mosque. Let me repeat it for you once more. Right under an active mosque. Now let's move on to a story that happened, well, just recently. Southern Lebanon, a few kilometers from the Israeli border, under a hill where a village is located. So Hezbollah built a drone airbase there so that if we shoot back, we'd hit the village and kill Arabs, and then they could shout, "Look, the Israelis are killing Arabs." That's normal, right? Yeah, that's normal. We're used to it, aren't we? I remember, when was it, in 84 when I arrived during the Lebanon operation. I flew in from New York. My regiment went there. The battery, the regiment, I don't know, somewhere, right? And I went there but was late by one day, so they left me in another place. And the guy said that, well, just like that, so to speak, there were several women and children standing in the houses, and between them there was a machine gun or a bazooka or something else, and they were shooting. So if we fired back, we would have hit them, their own children, we would have hit their own children. Now that means an underground facility, guarded by massive steel armored gates, was built. In recent decades, with direct Iranian involvement, planning, funding, everything else. The tunnel goes hundreds of meters deep into the mountain. Under the village, this very Abajal Zun, about 25 meters, and, as I already said, right under the active mosque. An important detail because it directly illustrates how Hezbollah uses civilian and religious sites as cover for military infrastructure. So if you shoot back at us and hit the mosque, that's just great. And you kill everyone praying there or anyone else who happens to be there, hiding at that moment. The commanders who showed the tunnel to journalists said that this facility was built to a much higher standard than Hezbollah's usual underground structures, so much so that it is being compared to the Iranian underground missile factory in Syria, which the Israeli army bombed, I think, in September of 2024. Inside the tunnel, which, by the way, is wide enough for a car to drive through, Hezbollah assembled Iranian drones. That is, they received the parts, smuggled them from Iran into Lebanon, which, as you can imagine, is easy enough. Then, after that, they launched them towards Israel. After capturing the facility, soldiers found about 50 fully assembled drones there, each with a warhead containing about 30 kilograms of explosives. That's exactly the type of drones that were used to strike Israel. In addition to the underground drones themselves, about 8 tons of explosive materials were found in the facilities. On the southern side of the mountain, they found launch silos from which these drones were launched toward Israel, and at the tunnel exit there are 4 separate exits, each protected by massive gates on rails. The commander of the Yahalom engineering unit told journalists, "These are drones that threaten the state of Israel across its entire territory. We came here to deprive Hezbollah of these capabilities. They were launching drones from there at our civilian targets. So you have no doubt, gentlemen, if they sacrifice their own, how do you think they treat ours?" And this is not just a nice phrase for the press. 50 drones with warheads carrying 30 kilograms of explosives each is real, concrete damage that was prevented only because these drones were not launched. And why weren't they launched? Because we entered Lebanon. And here I want to say something personal. I'll explain this thought in more detail later. For us, people who understand what it means to live next to an enemy who has been preparing for years, even decades, for an attack, every such discovered and destroyed tunnel is not just a military report. These are specific tragedies prevented for specific families in Galilee who today live more peacefully precisely because those 50 drones will not fly anywhere anymore. And now, what is happening not in April and not last month, but literally right now, these very days. Since mid-June, the main hotspot of fighting has been the Ali Taher ridge near the city of Nabatea, a strategic height from which the city itself, the supply corridor, and the network of roads connecting several key settlements in southern Lebanon can be fired upon. The IDF estimates that there is a large strategic underground facility beneath this ridge. According to the military, this is the nerve center of an entire regional division of Hezbollah, named Taher. Israel has surrounded this area and forced the militants underground, and several dozen, we believe, maybe more, militants remain trapped. Fighting occurred simultaneously underground and above ground, a rare and extremely difficult form of combat, by the way, underground, requiring tremendous courage from the assault units. The price? The cost of this operation for Israel turned out to be very high. I'll say it directly, without hiding anything. In just a few days of fighting, Lieutenant Colonel Dor Gedalia, commander of the 52nd Tank Battalion, was killed along with 3 members of his crew. Their tank was hit by a drone and possibly by an anti-tank missile as well. We don't know for sure. The following night, another soldier from the Maglan unit was killed as a result of rocket fire and explosive detonating drones. 13 others were wounded. Lebanese retired General Khalil Jamail, former commander of the southern El Litani sector, called Ali Taher the mother of all battles, Well, referring to Nabatea, of course. And in my opinion, that's an accurate description of the scale of what's at stake on this particular hill. It's important here to honestly distinguish between facts and disputed information. At the time of writing, Israeli military claimed they controlled the ridge area. However, a Lebanese military source cited by Al Jazeera claimed that no Israeli advances in the area had been observed over the past week. This means that the battle for Ali Taher is, as of today, an ongoing operation rather than a closed chapter. But the very fact that Israel is willing to sustain such losses for this particular hill speaks to its real strategic importance and significance. Control over Ali Taher means control over the logistics and supply lines of Hezbollah throughout the entire Nabatea sector. Now let's talk about the purpose of this operation and why I consider it one of the most justified military efforts in recent years. On June 26, Israel and Lebanon signed a security framework agreement brokered by the United States. There is a phrase in this agreement that, in my opinion, is key to understanding the entire logic behind what is happening. Israeli troops will withdraw from southern Lebanon only after the Lebanese army, not Hezbollah, but the official regular army of Lebanon, confirms that Hezbollah has been disarmed and its infrastructure dismantled. The agreement currently creates two that is, trial zones, south and north of the Litani River. By the way, I thought both were south, but it turns out one is south and the other is north, where the Lebanese army takes full responsibility for security. I like that one of these zones, one of the areas is north of the Litani, and that means we're aiming for more than just the area between the Israeli border and the Litani, which is good. That's the essence of this arrangement and why it's so important. For decades, the Litani border was actually guarded not by the state of Lebanon, but by an armed Shiite militia, the militia, Hezbollah, Iran, acting entirely in its own interests, not in the interests of Lebanon. That is, let's put it this way, more in the interests of Iran than in the interests of Lebanon, without any real accountability to the Lebanese government. They don't care. Yes, they have a boss with a much heavier hand. Now, for the first time in a long while, there's a real chance for a different configuration. I want you to understand this because it's insanely important. It may seem like just words, just some explanation, but yes, this is insanely important for the existence of the State of Israel. Between Israel and Hezbollah, it's not a void and not a Shiite militia, but the regular Lebanese army. For now, it's still very weak, a structure with which intergovernmental dialogues can be conducted. Participation is carried out by an agreement that physically controls the territory instead of an armed terrorist organization. More precisely, we are trying to teach it to control and provide weapons. The Americans allocated $100 million for this purpose. Prime Minister Antonia stubbornly outlined another fundamental element of this strategy. The civilian population, which was evacuated from the security zone in southern Lebanon, will not be allowed to return until Hezbollah disarms. Well, that's terrible, right? Yes, it sounds like a nightmare. I can imagine how much uproar there was, is, and will be about this. Let's figure it out. His words: "We maintain the original security zone constantly outside the range of anti-tank fire. We do not allow their forces to enter this zone. We also do not allow civilians to enter there." It stirred up the world. Well, it sounds harsh at first glance. Yes, oh, what a bad person towards the civilian population, yes. And I understand why this draws criticism from my point of view from the humanitarian perspective of the jerks. But the logic here is perfectly clear and, in my opinion, absolutely justified. Hezbollah has systematically used civilians and civilian infrastructure for years, mosques, residential buildings, even ambulances, as cover for their military facilities and operations. The Majal Zunya tunnel, literally under a mosque, as I told you. If civilians are allowed to immediately return home to the same area without waiting for real disarmament, no one will be able to prevent Hezbollah from rebuilding their infrastructure under the same cover. Well, literally in just a few years, and this is where all three stories I've told in this video come together. The destruction of the underground city in Kantara is not just a one-time strike on a weapons depot. It's the destruction of infrastructure built over many years, which can't be restored in weeks or months. Even in years, it's difficult. The capture of the drone factory in Majal Zunia means there are 50 specific drones that will never fly toward Galilee. I also hope the factory was blown up even though we weren't told. And the ongoing, though not yet finished, battle for Taher is an attempt to knock out the last major Hezbollah command and supply hub in the strip that borders the frontier. All 3 episodes are part of the same strategy. It's not just about physically pushing Hezbollah further from the border, but methodically depriving it of the very ability to rebuild the military machine it has been constructing for decades with Iranian help. And that's exactly why the Lebanese army, as a buffer between the two sides, is not just a formality or a diplomatic concession, but a key element of the entire structure of long-term security in northern Israel. I have to say for myself that for countless years, my children's theater, that is the equipment and cargo, has been in northern Israel. I have to say for myself that for countless years, my children's theater, in small groups of 2 or 3, without decorations or anything else, would go to bomb shelters and bunkers or somewhere else where terrified, shocked children were sitting. And there, this year in Kyiv, during Kyiv, we played games like that with the children, right? For hours. And so we, the actors, would go out, several groups, and literally put on 3, sometimes even 4 performances like that in the bomb shelter. And this went on for months. Months. I don't want to say years, but yes, for months. The goal is not a temporary lull before the next round of violence, but a structural change in the equation between missile silos beneath Lebanese villages and Israeli children in Kiryat Shmona. In Kiryat Shmona, we performed a hell of a lot of plays. We also performed plays in Metula, in schools, in basements, under whatever, wherever we could. There should be a national army of a sovereign country there, not an armed group that for years has been preparing invasions under the cover of civilian neighborhoods. And that's why I consider what's happening a real achievement, not just another military report among dozens of others. You know, everyone has their own experience. Well, I had such an experience. Actors call me and say, "We're not going to have lunch there afterwards, we're going home." I say, "Okay." They leave half an hour later. By the way, once we had lunch there together with the kids, thank God no one went there that time, they're bombing because they know something is going to happen there, and missiles are flying in. Decades of Iranian investments, hundreds of tons of concrete, thousands of meters of tunnels under the hills of southern Lebanon. All of this was created for one purpose: one day to strike civilian cities and towns in northern Israel. A truly massive pre-planned strike. Today, this infrastructure physically no longer exists. The 50 drones that were supposed to take off from the underground base in Majal Zun will never take off. The underground city in Kantara, designed for thousands of elite unit fighters, has been turned into a crater. And rubble too, I really hope. And where the fighting is still ongoing in Taher, Israel is paying a high price specifically to eliminate the last major enemy command center right at the border, instead of leaving this job for later. And most importantly, for the first time in a long while, a realistic framework for long-term peace is emerging, one that is not based on trust in Hezbollah. Not on trust in Hezbollah or its promises, but instead it's based on the physical presence of the regular Lebanese army between the two sides, and the physical absence of the infrastructure that previously gave Hezbollah its capabilities. Every destroyed tunnel. This is not just a tactical success in a single battle. This is a concrete, measurable step toward a future in which the residents of Kiryat Shmona, Metula, and dozens of other communities in northern Israel will be able to return to their homes. Not temporarily, not between 2 rounds of shelling, but for real. Because their homes and surroundings will no longer be threatened by the things that forced them to send their children into basements, into cellars, into bomb shelters. And we used to rush there and perform plays for them. I mean, plays. I don't do those plays anymore. Other people are doing them now. That was many years ago. But I really hope that plays will only be performed on stages. Not underground, but above ground. And for all sorts of pleasant reasons. Not to distract children from the nightmare that was happening around them. Ladies and gentlemen, If you want to get these analyses with facts and sources faster than the videos come out, and read my short reviews and reactions to what's happening, subscribe to my Telegram channel. This is Nachalian Weinstein US. It's called exactly the same as the one you're watching now on YouTube. It's just on the Telegram channel. There I post material as soon as news comes in without waiting for the full edit. And for now, goodbye until we meet again. I hope it'll be for good reasons.